Hey everyone, professional photographer Ian Plant here and founder of ShutterMonkeys.com. And in this video, I'm going to take a quick look at Adobe's new mask tool found in Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. Is the new mask tool a game changer when it comes to photo editing? Well, stay tuned to find out more. All right, let's get started with our quick look at Adobe's new masking tools. Just as a preliminary matter, I'm using Adobe Camera Raw. I know most people out there are probably using Adobe Lightroom. The good news is that when it comes to image processing, the two programs are virtually identical. So everything that I show you here in Adobe Camera Raw, you can also use in Adobe Lightroom. So Adobe has created this new panel called the masking panel, and we can open it up. And it gives us many different options. Select subject, select sky, brush, linear gradient, radial gradient, color range, and luminance range. There's also one that's grayed out right now, which is depth range. And so the brush, linear gradient, and radial gradient, if you've been using Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw for a while, you'll recognize those as the old local adjustment tools. And now they've been slightly rebranded. So we can still access those tools to make local adjustments manually. So for example, I can select the brush and it brings up a local adjustment brush. And you can see that it's creating this panel, this create new mask panel. And it shows the new mask here. I can actually go click into that and rename it if I want to. And I have it set up so that it's going to show the overlay. And so that's going to show the overlay of any place where I'm applying that local adjustment. And so I've chosen red as my overlay color. And that way I know exactly where the mask is being applied. So let's say I want to adjust the exposure of that local area using the brush. As soon as I click on the exposure slider and start adjusting it, you can see that that overlay goes away. So I can actually see in real time the effects of the adjustment that I'm making. So that's pretty straightforward. I can access all of those old adjustment tools that I've been using for years. But there are some new options in this new masking tool that allow you to fully unlock the creative potential of your photographs, and it makes editing so much easier. Let's go ahead and create a new mask. And this time, let's use Select Sky. Now for this tool, Adobe is using an artificial intelligence engine, and it's making a smart selection of just the sky. And it does a really good job. You can see from the red overlay that's now appeared on the image that it has made a selection of the sky. It hasn't selected any of the landscape. And this allows me to quite easily make an adjustment just to the sky. And this is a real game changer when you're processing landscape images or anything taken outdoors and you want to make adjustments to the sky. It's really easy to select the sky and make the adjustments only to that part of the image without affecting anything else. So this allows you to bring out the full potential of a dramatic sky, and it's really great when you're working with sunrise and sunset images in particular. These are really useful tools, and I think this is going to be a game changer for my landscape photography. Now, you want to be careful. Let's take this image, for example. There was actually a bit of mist over the mountains in the background. So if we go to Select Sky, you can see that it's made a pretty good adjustment. But as I start adjusting the sky exposure, you can see that it really hasn't quite picked up some of that mist that's covering the mountains. So the sky has gone a lot darker with this adjustment, but the mountains and the mist that's clinging to the mountains haven't gone dark with it. And so that makes the adjustment rather obvious and a bit extreme. Now you can add to your selection. Just hit the Add to Mask button. And this gives me the same options I had when I created the mask in the first place. So in this case, I'm going to add a brush selection to that mask. And that allows me to just go in and manually select the parts of the image that I want to add to that mask. And that way, when I make the adjustments to the sky, I am also adjusting those parts of the mountain that I want to adjust with it. Now, for an image like this, I could have just gone in and done a brush selection over the entire sky and the mountain. So here, the Select Sky option really hasn't done much good for me. But definitely there are lots of times where that Select Sky option is going to allow you to easily edit your images. So for example, with this photo taken on the south shore of Lake Superior, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to select sky. And you can see that it's going to make that selection, and it does a great job just picking the sky. As a matter of fact, it has picked the sky without picking the water. I figured that might be something tough for the artificial intelligence engine to figure out, but it did a great job. So I can go ahead and make some adjustments to the sky here and I can enhance its contrast and maybe bring out some of its color as well. And I can make that adjustment without affecting any other part of the image. So I think the select sky option is really useful for landscape images. For wildlife and people photography, Adobe has created a select subject mask. And this is really powerful. I'm really impressed with how well this works. So here it's done a pretty good job. It has selected the orangutan. Also, some of that selection has picked up parts of the tree as well. So this particular instance didn't do a perfect job. I can go ahead and selectively brighten my subject, and I can always subtract from the selection. I'm just going to use a brush subtraction, and I'm going to shrink the brush here with my left bracket key and then just take out the tree itself so that I'm only applying this adjustment to the orangutan. And then I can go back in and I can complete my adjustments on my subject here. And so I'm going to get some more saturation. I'm going to warm up the orangutan just a little bit to color balance it better with the rest of the image. And I'm going to bring up the exposure value of the orangutan so it's brighter. And now I can go in and create a new mask, and I'm going to select subject again. And what it's done is it's created a new subject mask that's very similar to the one that I created just before. But if I go into the subject one of this new mask and I click on more options, it'll give me the option to invert my selection. So it's going to reverse the selection. So now instead of selecting my subject, I'm selecting everything else in the image. So I can go ahead and darken the exposure of that background, bring down the highlights. I can make whatever adjustments I want to the background so that all the adjustments are applied only to the parts of the image that are not my subject. So that's really powerful, that ability to invert your selection. And you can see how powerful this new masking is. If we look at the original image, here in this original image, the orangutan is in shadow. It's darker than the background. And so the eye really doesn't go to the main subject as effectively as it should in this composition. But with the masking applied, the orangutan is now brighter, it stands out more, the background has been tamed, and it was the artificial intelligence of the masking tools that allowed me to do this easily. Without these tools, previously this would have been a much more difficult thing to accomplish, and it wouldn't have been done as precisely, but this new artificial intelligence for select subject is really amazing. And I wondered how effective this AI tool really would be. So I tried to pick an image that I figured would be really, really tricky for the AI. And the trickiest image I can think of was this photo I took years ago of two polar bears fighting in a snowstorm. And it was really thick, blowing snow. I figured if anything would fool the AI here as it was trying to find a subject, that this would be it. But let's go into the masking tool, select subject, and see how it does. Amazing. Adobe's AI engine had no problem picking out the subject. You can see that it also selected this area that's in the gap between the two polar bears' heads. And so it's not a perfect selection, but it's actually pretty good. And it's something that I can definitely work with, and I can always refine that selection. I'm going to zoom into 100%. I can go back to the mask. Let's go click on that mask one, and let's see if I can subtract. I'm going to use the brush tool once again, and I am going to shrink it down so that I can just subtract from the selection that gap between the polar bears. So that way now when I make any adjustments, it's not also going to adjust that space in between. And I think that's going to be really useful for me. Now, the select subject tool isn't going to be as useful for most of your landscape photos. You could try it. So for example, on this one, it's made a selection of the primary feature in the landscape. And I think this was kind of an easy one for the AI to work with because there was one subject that stood out from everything else. But most landscape images, if you try to select subject, you're going to find that it just doesn't really work for you. But for this particular image, I can go ahead and make some minor adjustments to that pinnacle that is standing up in the middle of this image, maybe warming it up and adding some saturation. But then I am going to go ahead and create a new mask and select the sky. And this is going to allow me to darken that sky just a little bit and to bring out more of its texture and its detail. And so I'll just apply clarity, dehaze, and maybe drop the exposure a little bit. Once again, I don't want to go too far because I think that starts looking obvious and artificial. So just a slight adjustment. But just to show you how powerful this AI engine is, I am going to make a very extreme adjustment. And then I'm going to click out of that mask. We're going to go into 100%. And obviously this is not an adjustment I would normally make, but I made this extreme adjustment so we can see that there isn't really any fringing around the image. A lot of times when you are trying to darken the sky in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, and maybe using the highlight tool to bring the sky down, you'll notice this really obvious fringing around the subjects that might be sticking up into the sky. And this new AI engine actually does a really good job with its selection, and you're not seeing that really obvious fringing. So typically what you would see would be this white fringe around the subject sticking up into the sky. And we're really not seeing that here, even with this really obvious adjustment. So I'm just going to go back and I'm going to select that mask, and I'm going to take that exposure back up to a higher level, and I'm going to drop it from the original, but not so much that it looks artificial. So I think that looks a lot better. This allows me to make some subtle adjustments to the sky without affecting the rest of the image. All right, so Adobe has also included two options called color range and luminance range. And these allow you to make targeted adjustments. So color range allows you to pick a particular color, and luminance range allows you to pick a certain brightness and make changes only to that level of brightness or similar brightness tones. So let's start off with color range. And the way you use color range is you bring the cursor over the image, and the cursor will change to an eyedropper, and you make a selection of the color that you want, and it's going to pick a range of that color. And you can refine that by sliding this slider left and right. So I can select more of that color or less of that color, so it expands the range around that color that you've picked. And that looks pretty good right there. You can see the red overlay is telling me all the areas that are now impacted by that adjustment mask. And then I can just go ahead and make my adjustments to just that color range. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten those greens, and then I'm also going to shift them a little bit in color balance, maybe warm them up a little bit, and then increase the saturation. So that's a pretty useful tool. But now let's go ahead and try luminance range. And this will allow me to select a brightness value, basically. And so let's say with this photo, I want to adjust the shadows in this image, the dark areas of the image. I can go ahead and click on one of these dark areas, and you can see it's selected a range of luminance values around that mostly black area that I clicked on. And you can adjust the luminance range until it matches the parts of the image that you want to adjust. And then you can go ahead and make your adjustments. And you can see that it is, of course, only affecting those parts of the image that I selected within that luminance range. So it's a really easy way of targeting your adjustment only to specific brightness values within the photograph. So the new color and luminance range masking options just add another tool to your disposal for making smart masks that allow you to make very precise local adjustments to your image. So it used to be that if you wanted to do any of this advanced masking, you had to do it in Adobe Photoshop, but increasingly the functionality from Photoshop is being imported into Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. And as a result, now I do the vast majority of my image editing in Adobe Camera Raw and only rarely go into Photoshop. So this has really enhanced my ability to make powerful edits to my raw files, and it's also greatly simplified my digital darkroom workflow. You can find many more great free photo tips on the Shutter Monkeys YouTube channel, or visit us at shuttermonkeys.com. Thanks for watching.